Hello and welcome again to this episode of At Home on the Yard. I am Jeff McKinney, and today is a very, very special day. Today is, we are here. We want to first start off by honoring MLK, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so, for me, how could that just be one day? But today is that day. And so I do want to take a moment to pause and reflect as we get kicked off, um, and just say that it's not about volume on something like this, especially with where we are today in society and what's going on around us. It's more about, from my perspective, and hopefully what we'll talk a bit about today is it's more about discernment. And so there's a lot of noise. It's going on all over the place. Distractions, things that you may feel that you care about, some things you don't care about, but it's all noise, and it's distracting to what's necessary now in a time like now, which is discernment. And so let's pause and just kind of let that sit for just a moment. Um, and then I'll kind of tell you, kind of where this came from and how this clarity settled with me. So if I jump back in, my work has been centered around modernizing the tool set to deliver resources to people who were facing challenges. And so I've had my own unique set of challenges. And I've tried my best to, in all of the trauma that they have caused, make that as short term as possible by pursuing healing. In pursuing healing, I arrived at the point where, you got to get back to who you are. And who I am is I build solutions. And so I started dreaming about what I would want to build. And it really was, hey, look, you, you, it's best to build what you know about. And so what I was very familiar with at the time and what was top of mind for me, given the amount of pain that I was suffering or enduring, where those were the solutions that I was starting to kind of dream about. And so, coming up to this point where I really feel like we have a responsible community that is positioned to be an alternative to social media and the challenges that social media has. By leveraging discernment, you can see these gaps that we have in authenticity and also in, really the spirit of what these tools are being used to accomplish today. And so, that's one solution that I can point to. I can point to the vision we have to actually give very specific types of services that focus on well-being and well-being from a overall wellness standpoint, rather than just looking at, kind of like a fragmented or siloed type of value that one could offer. And so it's a what I thought was a unique approach, given that I was experiencing challenges from both corporate spaces, family dynamics, and then broadly speaking, I could see people who were able to, what I thought, either know right from wrong and not um, choose right, or if they were afraid to choose right. I wasn't. I'm not quite sure what the challenge is, but for me, I knew that we needed a better path for those who wanted to choose right, because I just knew there had to be some. I mean, that would want to choose right, and I knew that I was actually. It took a lot of courage for me to speak up in instances, and even in instances where I speak up today. These are things that feel like they take courage to speak about. And so today in my reflection time, as I was thinking about the legacy of Dr. King, I had gotten up and I had put on some, the old school Martin Luther King song that came out in the 80s with New Editions in there, Whitney Houston's in there, the Fat Boys in there. It's like, I it just takes me back to being back home in Oak Cliff. And so put that on for the kids. Wife's making pancakes. It's a beautiful morning. It's MLK Day. And I ran across in my reflection time, I ran across a speech or an essay that Dr. King wrote in 1947, an excerpt from it. And it was called, while he was at Morehouse, I believe, The Purpose of Education. In it, he warned that the highest function of education is not information, but discernment. The ability to tell right from wrong, truth from falsehood, substance from spectacle. He warned that without moral grounding and critical thinking, institutions could produce people who are trained, credentialed, and productive, yet capable of participating in harm. When I heard that, I immediately thought of HR. Like, this is a group that serve a corporate function that I saw time and time again fail when brought the truth. And it wasn't like they didn't know the truth. It was that it was designed that way. And so I said, this feels like something that I'm familiar with. And the interesting point was, Dr. King was saying education versus discernment. And so discernment is not something that I deem as more educational. It is up to a certain point, but then you have to now have a discipline and a character about yourself to do the thing that you know. And that's what I think is the missing piece, because I just know that, for example, that day when this guy was yelling and cursing at me, and there's 6 or 7 other people on this call, and this is at Dell Technologies, and nobody reports it to HR. At least one of those 7 should have been paying attention when they took that yearly compliance training that says that this is how we should behave in the workplace, and this is what racism looks like and bias looks like. One of those 7 should have been awake, but nobody did it. And so that's just an example of why I didn't totally agree with what the essay was saying, but I did agree with it because I do think that there's a missing piece in the system today that that allows for people to, even when they know right from wrong, be incentivized. And it could be not to your best interest. And I know this for a fact from my own experiences, not in your best interest to tell the truth or to be honest or to do what's right. And so in looking at that, I started to think about, when you really boil it down, that's gaslighting. That's gaslighting. When people know that that's wrong, but then they see the system that they're in not handle it as wrong, then they start to think about, well, I guess it's really not that bad, or that's just, I guess it's okay, or whatever the thought process is. I don't know. I can't relate to it because, as anyone could tell you, I'm one to speak up. I'd like to think of myself as one that speaks up. And so bottom line is, when I was, building these solutions, I wasn't necessarily aware about this essay. But then as I was reflecting during this moment this morning, I was thinking about kind of what the essay was saying and what my own experiences were, because I have the um, the wonderful advantage of being able to look back on such a legacy. And oh, what a shame it is if you do not, because this is something that you can bounce your own thoughts against and know that um, it's not one that is dark. It's not one that is inhumane. It's not a perfect one. You'll hear people say whatever they want to say, but none of us are perfect. And so once we understand that, then we say, okay, well, is this someone who was aligned from a spiritual standpoint to go out and do good? And so if that's the case, then we can say that this statement around discernment is one that bears fruit. And that's the way that I always think about, how do we build solutions? We build solutions that are focused on bearing fruits. And so in the situations that I was referencing, or I am referencing, there's just very little fruits, and gaslighting is normalized. And that's a very, very damning position for one to feel like that's the end point. That can become compounded when there may be family dynamics that add additional uh, gaslighting or lack of support. It really could, in my own experience, create a cocktail, if you will, or a scenario to where one starts to detach from what's real. And so I saw, in reflecting in Dr. King's essay, my own experience here in call it 2021 through 2026. That, yeah, he was right on the money. He was right on the money. And so for me, I thought, it's best in this moment to highlight that it is not just systems, it's not just people, it's usually both together. These types of challenges are dependent upon disjointed structures, meaning that no unified support system. It's hard to point to whose fault and who's accountable. One of the things that I'd highlight, to support why I believe they know right from wrong in these systems, is that there's always a mutual agreement to arbitrate, and there's always an NDA. And so that means that they're basing that decision on something, and it also acknowledges that something doesn't want to be said aloud. We don't want something to be said aloud, but what is that? And these are proactive things that are typically put in place in a situation where someone is trying to control the mistreatment, or a system that malfunctions and doesn't treat people correctly. And so I also noticed that silence is rewarded. And so I can point to solutions, or I can point to scenarios in my own experience, and people that were responsible for supporting me, and they played that role up to a certain point, and then they were gone. And they were gone because in the old system, without transparency and visibility, silence is rewarded, and truth is punished. And so I understood. I never really saw anybody get punished for the truth outside of myself, that I can think of. When it comes to my own scenarios, I can see where I did go and share the truth about what other people may have been experiencing at times, and it did actually produce fruit. And so that's kind of how I knew that when people are unified and they tell the truth together, then there's power in that. And there's power in that. And so, for me, having to endure all of these things and learn these lessons and have these experiences, as I said earlier, in pursuit of healing, it was necessary to build solutions. What I learned through all of my years of therapy and even my own journey of basically getting to a point where you could be in therapy taking care of yourself, and that's not going to help the system, or help you in the system that is designed to fail. And so, I then started to think about, okay, so I went through that journey, but what is it that I'm supposed to do? And I thought, okay, well, this is now time for me to get back to starting to trust myself, because for a while I couldn't trust myself because I'm getting gaslit from every angle. And either I'm going to be this arrogant, whatever names that I'm being called, and not trust myself and trust myself, or it was just too many different. So I had to go get with people that were around me I could trust, that could give me information about myself, and I could give them information about me and what I was experiencing, and then together we could have a better understanding. And so, but not everybody is led to be able to do that in that way. I was. And so over time I started to get back to really looking at, all right, well, now let's just boil this all the way down to like, really, how can you like build up a process or a system around this. And I saw inability for people to recognize fruits versus non-fruits. I saw people who routinely and systems that routinely would lead you to believe that money was some type of fruit, attention was fruit. It would promote output versus character. So it didn't matter if you had character or not. You just, as long as you put the output out there, then it doesn't matter who you are, really. And so that gave an over for me. What I saw is that would give a it would give people the wrong perception or about what the future looked like. And so that's why you would get someone who thought that they could yell and curse at you in front of leadership and management and in front of your peers, and then believe that they're going to be able to not be held accountable for it. And so that's how that happens. But as we can see here in front of us, there's always an option to innovate and create from whatever pain or discomfort one may have. And so for me, bringing it back to kind of what we're here for, um, MLK, Dr. King, and the legacy was something that has always been kind of ingrained into, and it wasn't just on one day. Like this was kind of, the ideals of it was something that I just kind of always have been attracted to. And then also thinking about, okay, well, how do we address the problems that we face today? And so, I said earlier, I was talking about social media and how social media is not something that anyone would view as healthy today. I don't think anyone would say that they trust it. I think people feel like they have to do it or they're going to be left out. It's almost a necessary thing people feel. We can't change who owns or controls the algorithms. That is an environment that we are just in. And so what other option is there other than to innovate, building infrastructure that aligns with discernment, accountability, courage, and wellness, just to name a few, in a space where now you have uh, uh, commerce. You have a capitalistic approach to going out and addressing real challenges. So you don't have to tell people what to think, but you can offer the support to those to help them decide and discern what's fruit and what's not. And over time, helping people along that path, when also focusing on, we have to be honest with one another and we have to tell the truth. Then we can clearly look and see what's what, judging, just judging the fruit. And so we focus on, kind of those ideals in wellness, to pair with, there was this dream that we all have heard about that we have yet to realize. I think right now it feels like, if I'm just kind of sensing, it feels like there's this anxious energy kind of just around. I know for myself, it's been an extreme challenge. However, I have also, in being challenged, I have been gifted with the kind of the path of being able to arrive here and have this vision of integration and have these solutions in community starting to, kind of take, I would say take, I won't say take flight, but it's there as an alternative, a responseful alternative. And so when you kind of add to that, this day is about the legacy of Dr. King. I do want to say that it's also an opportunity to talk about what we have, looking forward. And so we all have a civic responsibility and a choice to engage civically. And so you have a set of gifts, and we're all called to steward those gifts. And part of that is, how are you going to give in support of others in a way that generates fruits versus flash. And so right now there's a lot of flash. And so we're looking to have fruits and flash, or fruits without flash, but flash without the fruits. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. And so as we come to closing and celebrating and honoring the legacy of Dr. King, what I would just say is MLK Day is not about nostalgia. It's about discernment and practice, about building systems where truth can survive, accountability can exist, and people can live with integrity. If this resonates, there is a space to walk alongside this work in community at your rhythm with care, I would say. So the work continues. It's time for me to go spend time with my family on this day. I have to get back into this gumbo before this college football championship game. And so I just want to say to everyone out there that although things may seem tough, there's always hope. Whether you can feel it, you just got to know it. And so for me, I am a demonstration of that. I will speak more about what that looks like and how we're going to support others in that. But before I jump, there is one thing that I did not get to say. I wanted to say congratulations to Morgan Price. Morgan Price is a gymnast. She was a part of the first Forever Fish University gymnastics team. And in this last year, at the conclusion, after excelling for 3 years, 3 years, I think it was 3 years, 3 years at Fisk, she is now at the University of Arkansas. And yesterday she won first place all around there at the meet. So congratulations to Morgan Price. You all, happy MLK Day. I'm Jeff McKinney. This is At Home on the Yard. Peace.